You're Human and You. Written by Mad Max the Black. Chapter 23. The Coming Dawn, Part 2. I handed the notebook to Applejack, who took it gingerly in her hooves, trying to avoid touching the patches of blood. Rarity ignored the notebook completely, instead focusing on my bag.
"What is that?"
she asked, staring at the bag in horror. Taking back my notebook from Applejack, I scribbled out a response. I just held the notebook in front of her. I was pretty sure that she wouldn't want to touch it. It's a bag I made for myself. It got torn up while I was running from the Manticores. Rarity looked back and forth between the notebook and the bag, shaking her head in disgust.
"That will not do at all, darling,"
she huffed, looking at the offending bag like it was roadkill.
"I will not allow you to walk around with that thing any longer. After you get out of the hospital, come over to my shop and I'll create a new bag for you. Come to think of it,"
she said as she stared an eye at my tattered clothing.
"I can make better clothes, too."
I went to write out a message telling her that she didn't need to bother, but my notebook was pulled out of my hands by a light blue aura.
"I insist, my dear,"
she said, giving me a warm smile.
"Think of it as a way of saying thank you for saving the Crusaders and to make amends for my earlier behavior,"
she added, giving my clothes another embarrassed look.
"What was I thinking?"
she said under her breath. Sighing heavily, my shoulders slumped and I nodded my head, defeated. I was secretly cheering inside because I seriously needed new clothing, but I couldn't let Rarity win this round so easily. Not after all those snide comments she made at me when she thought I was a dumb beast. Rarity had just given me back my notebook, and I was about to ask about the girls, when Rainbow Dash suddenly came flying in through the open window, landing on my bed. She turned her back to me and looked at Applejack and Rarity.
"I found Twilight leaving the guardhouse,"
she said, barely winded from her flight.
"She's on her way here right now with Sunny. How's the big guy doing?"
I stifled a laugh at her expense. She apparently didn't realize that I was awake when she flew in and perched upon my legs. Considering her size, she was actually pretty light. Deciding to have some fun, I reached out and gave her bunny ears. Both Rarity and Applejack had to cover their mouths with their hooves to stop from laughing. Seriously, it didn't take much to amuse most ponies.
"Why don't you ask him yourself, Sugar Cube?"
snickered Applejack, motioning with her hoof for Rainbow to turn around. I retracted my head quickly and leaned back before she glanced over her shoulder at me. When she saw that I was awake and looking at her, Rainbow's wings shot open and her eyes widened.
"Whoa, didn't see you there, big guy."
Her words froze from her lips as her bottom jaw fell to the bed, followed shortly by her rear. She stared up at me in some kind of horrified awe, her wings standing further at attention. The smile slowly left my face as she continued to stare at me, replaced instead by a look of confusion. Glancing at Applejack and Rarity, I raised my eyebrows in silent question. Both of them just shrugged their shoulders, equally confused. It was when I started waving my hand in front of Rainbow's face that she finally moved.
"Dude,"
he breathed, standing up and taking a shaky step forward.
"your eyes look wicked."
I looked at her in confusion. What is she talking about? My eye is no different from the last time she saw me. Or was she talking about the bandages? I didn't know why she would suddenly find the bandages around my eye interesting. They had been there all week, and she'd visited plenty of times. Was she really that oblivious? Lifting my hand up, I reached for the bandage covering my right eye. Only to touch bare skin. I froze instantly, my hand over my eye. There was no bandage covering it. It was completely bare, yet I still couldn't see anything. All three of them immediately noticed my deepening look of horror, and Rainbow Dash flinched back, a guilty look on her face.
"Dude, you didn't know?"
she asked in a low voice. She glanced at Applejack and Rarity, who just shrugged.
"We didn't tell him because we thought he knew,"
Applejack said, rubbing the back of her head.
"I just assumed that Twilight had already told him."
Rainbow looked back at me, her gaze concerned along with another emotion I couldn't quite place. I ignored her, however, opting instead to try to get out of bed.
"Whoa there, hon.
Maverick said as I started to rise. She hurried to my side and tried to push me back into bed.
Where do you think you're going?
I threw the notebook at them. A new message scrawled at the bottom. I need a mirror. All three of them flinched and Rarity shot me a concerned look.
I'm not sure if that would be wise at the moment, darling.
I pointed firmly at the notebook, cutting her off. I need a mirror.
But you just had a traumatic experience. Can't this wait?
I jetted my finger at the notebook again, and she signed the feet before opening her saddlebags and levitated a mirror out of it from its depths.
All right, darling,
she said, flinging the mirror over to me.
But don't say I didn't warn you.
Grabbing the mirror, I flipped it over and gazed at my reflection. My face was dirty from the mad dash through the forest. Small scratches from the branches covered my cheeks, angry red marks against my skin. I had stubble growing across my cheeks and chin, as well as my upper lip. My brown hair, bleached slightly by the sun, covered my ears and hung down in front of my eyes. My left eye was completely normal, the dark brown color unmarred and in pristine condition. However, the same could not be said for the other one. A long, thin scar ran from the left side of my face, starting under my left eye and trailing over my nose, before reaching the bottom of my right eye. The eye itself was completely useless. No iris, no pupil, just a pure white sphere gazed back at me, almost like someone had removed my eye and replaced it with a glass marble filled with milk. It appeared that, despite my original belief, the blade did not miss my eye. It destroyed it. As I just stared at the eye, transfixed by its horrific beauty, the others shuffled around nervously.
It's not that bad, dear,
Rarity said, her voice painfully chipper and false.
It's actually quite, dashing.
Yep.
Jack chimed in, a forced smile on her face.
It shows that you're tough.
And look on the bright side,
Rainbow said, inching closer with an eager gleam in her eye.
Now you and Sweetabelle can join the We Got Attacked by Humans in a Blind in One Eye Club.
Both Applejack and Rarity shot her an evil glare, but I actually snorted at that. I wasn't really upset that the eye was useless. Don't get me wrong, it still sucked and I would have liked to have it back to normal. But it wasn't really a huge loss on my part. While my left eye was a perfect 20/20, my right eye, which had been a lazy eye I had surgery on, was only 20/70. That meant that even though I could see out of it, I relied heavily upon my other eye. So the only real problem I had now with losing the eye was a permanently larger blind spot. Plus, I was pissed nobody told me that my eye was useless. My guess was the doctors neglected to tell anyone because I was a human. No, the eye didn't really concern me much. It was the way that Rainbow Dash was looking at me that concerned me. All three mirrors just stared at me as I studied my blind eye, each with different expressions of concern, or, in Rainbow's case, excitement and awe. Really, it was starting to creep me out. Tilting my head to the side slightly, I leaned in closer to the mirror, trying to get as good a look as possible.
You okay, darling?
Rarity asked tentatively.
You aren't upset, are you?
I turned my gaze from the mirror and looked over at her. I gave her a blank look for several seconds before cracking a strange smile. Rarity and Applejack flinched slightly at the sight of my teeth, but Rainbow just inched closer, her wings still at attention.
I don't care what Twilight says.
Applejack muttered to Rarity.
I'll never get used to that smile of his.
Rarity nodded nervously in our agreement before they both turned and gave me sheepish grins. I smirked at the two mirrors before returning my attention to the mirror, only to find Rainbow Dash inches from my face. I jerked my head back before I gave her a bemused look, a look that just screamed, "Can I help you?"
Dude, that scar. Your eye.
She said breathlessly, a small blush spreading across her face.
There. Awesome.
Slowly licking her lips, she continued to stare at my face as her tail twitched behind her, and her back legs began to slowly knead down into the bed, her wings still stiffening gradually by her sides. An odd odor was beginning to fill the room. I swallowed nervously as I realized what that emotion on her face exactly was. Oh boy, not good. Applejack and Rarity were staring at her in shock, mouths agape. She was slowly closing the gap between us, and I already scooted back as far as I could go. I glanced sideways at the other two, silently pleading for help, but I think they were completely frozen. Rainbow was now close enough that I could feel her hot breath on my face, her crimson eyes glinting with me with inner hunger. She slowly inched her face closer, her eyes starting to close as she moved her lips closer to mine. Mere centimeters separated from her moist lips from mine, her eyes closed tight in anticipation.
Where the fuck is he? I'm going to kill him!
Everything froze as Twilight's voice echoed around the hospital, causing the entire building to shake. The needy look immediately left Rainbow's eyes, replaced instead by fear. I was saved. Unfortunately, it was by the lesser of two evils.
I gotta go,
She said before bolting back out the window and leaving a rainbow trail in her wake.
Right behind you.
Maverick called after her as she opened the door and shot down the hall. Ripping the mirror from my hands, Rarity was right on her heels.
Remember to come visit me later if you're still alive.
She called back to me as she ran, and just like that, I was alone in the hospital room, awaiting my final judgment. I should have let the manticores eat me. I had a brief moment of peace before the door flung open, revealing a fuming Twilight. The goddess of magic was glaring daggers at me as her mane slowly began to smoke. Her teeth were grinding together as she growled at me. Her wings splayed aggressively by her sides, and sparks flew from her horn, energy crackling down the entire length. Hell hath no fury. As I stared at her wide-eyed, I was pretty sure I could hear my heart monitor short-circuiting beside me. Shit. This is worse than the time Spike dropped a book in the bathtub when he was taking a bath. Twilight took a step forward while the tile creaking ominously underneath her hoof.
What?
She growled, her eyes glowing with up in her fire.
The fuck were you thinking?
I shot a quick glance at the open window through which Rainbow had disappeared not minutes ago, weighing my options. My room was on the second floor, so the ground wasn't too far below. I would probably suffer some bruising and maybe a few broken bones, but I would get out alive. Unfortunately, Twilight saw where I was looking, and the window was quickly surrounded by her magic and slammed shut, the force of the blow causing the glass to rattle in its frame.
What possibly possessed you to go into that forest, accompanied by only 3 fillies and a baby dragon?
She growled, taking another step at me.
3 fillies, a baby dragon, and an injured human. What the fuck were you thinking?
Well, once you put it that way, it does sound pretty stupid, doesn't it? In my defense, Spike was the one in charge. I gave her a sheepish smile, trying hard to resist the urge to bolt. I could feel my right eye twitch slightly as she continued to approach me step by step. Twilight's eyes flashed white, and she mentioned at the young dragon.
You let a baby dragon tell you what to do? You let a baby dragon tell you what to do?
She asked, her voice sounding as several people were talking at once. If it wasn't for the fact that she was about to tear my head off, I probably would have found that cool as hell.
What possibly possessed you to agree to that?
They caught me by surprise! Twilight just glared at me, growling slightly. I decided that I should probably elaborate. It was the first time I saw Sweetie Belle up close, and I was too shocked at her injuries to...
I thought you were intelligent!
Twilight snarled.
Tell me what part could have been possibly a good idea, entering the Everfree Force during a Manticore mating season. What were you thinking?
I'm a human, and in case you haven't noticed, we aren't the most intelligent species out there. The pain medication they had me on was wearing off, but it seemed that there's still enough left in my system to make my mind not realize that I was on extremely thin ice with this mare with the power of the gods. Leaping him out of the bed, Twilight roared at me.
Stop joking around! You could have died!
The entire bed shook with the force of her shout. Trust me, dying is the last thing I plan on doing. I said with a smirk on my face while my brain screamed at me to shut up. Instantly, I knew I had said the wrong thing. Energy burst from Twilight, causing all nearby machines to immediately shut down. A great pressure pushed down on my chest, making it difficult to breathe. Twilight's eyes were pure white, her mane flying around her head in an unseen hurricane. Snarling, she lunged forward to me, pushing her nose into mine. I stared at her. I was pretty sure that my time had finally come.
Take this seriously, you mother... Bucker.
Twilight's voice died in her throat as the magic around her immediately diminished. Her eyes returned to their usual violet color and they began to tear up. Placing a hoof over her mouth, Twilight backed up slightly, her wings lying limp by her side. As she continued to back up, I just stared at the place her face used to be, utterly confused at her sudden mood swing. Twilight fell backward onto her flanks, tears streaming down her face as she continued to stare at me in horror. Slowly lowering the hoof covering her mouth, she breathed.
Your eye.
I stared at Twilight incredulously. That's what got her upset? That's what stopped her rage? My eye? I know it's bad, but I didn't think it's that bad.
I'm so sorry.
She whispered, tears slowly rolling down her face and falling onto the comforter below. This only served to make me more confused. What are you sorry for? I asked, trying hard to figure out what the hell was going on. One minute she's about to kill me, and the next she's in tears apologizing to me.
I caused your eye.
I snorted, rolling my eyes in disbelief. Really? She thought this was her fault? You weren't in the pit. You didn't have the knife. You didn't do this to me. Twilight shook her head, the tears still coming.
I was the one who blasted the human with the knife.
She cried, her body trembling slightly. She refused to look at me.
I'm the reason the blade cut across your face and hit your eye. I caused your eye. And now, you're going to hate me.
With that, she broke down. Placing my hand over my mouth, I sighed as I looked at the broken mirror in front of me. I didn't know what to think anymore. Mere moments ago, she was ready to tear my head off for going into the Everfree Forest, and now she was practically crying her eyes out because she thought that she was responsible for my ruined eye. I don't get paid enough to deal with this. Talk about a bad case of being bipolar. What the hell was I supposed to feel about this? Why do I feel like the saner one in this relationship? Staring down at the sobbing mare, I couldn't help to feel my heart go out to her. After everything she's done for me, after every little comfort she's provided me, she still thinks that something like this was going to make me hate her. Twilight, for a mare as intelligent as you are, you can be pretty stupid sometimes. I sighed as I dragged my hand down my face. I don't blame you, Twilight.
You don't?
She glanced up at me, the fur on her cheeks wet and matted. Her eyes searched my face for any signs of deception. I just shook my head at her, smiling warmly. She blinked up at me in confusion. Tears still ran down her face, but they were gradually beginning to fade.
But if I hadn't hit him with my magic...
I would have died. Reaching in, I grasped Twilight's forearm from my hand, gently pulling her over and onto my lap. Wrapping my arms around her, I hugged her close and nuzzled my face into her mane. She was hesitant at first, but after several seconds I felt her return my hug, gripping me tightly in her hooves, as though she was afraid I would suddenly disappear. I was dimly aware that, elsewhere in the hospital, I could hear nurses running around trying to comfort patients disturbed by Twilight's rampage. We stayed like that for a while, each enjoying each other's presence. As I hugged Twilight, I caught the faint scent of lavender. Burying my nose into her mane, I sighed happily at the scent. The smell of home. I thought absentmindedly, my mind drifting back onto Earth in my old life. The soft cooing noise from Twilight quickly brought me back to the present. I blushed as I realized what I was doing, and quickly removed my face from her mane. Eventually, Twilight broke the embrace. Leaning back, she wiped her eyes with a hoof, sniffling slightly.
I'm sorry. I yelled at you.
She whispered, sounding tired.
I know it isn't a good reason to take my frustration out on you, but it's just... It's been a rather stressful day. Having to spend all day dealing with Darkflare and his crew, only to find out that you were attacked by a group of manticores. It was kind of too much.
She nuzzled my collarbone, murmuring softly into the flesh. Darkflare?
The leader of the group that kidnapped you?
Twilight said, not moving her head from my neck. She pressed her nose into my shoulder, inhaling deeply.
Sunny and I had interrogated him today. and he was less than helpful. Didn't you know his name?
No, they never said his name once while I was staying with them. I made sure they emphasized stay in the most sarcastic way possible since I couldn't talk.
Strange.
Twilight muttered, still refusing to move, keeping her eyes closed. She rested her head on my shoulder, a small smile on her face. One of her wings brushed gently against my side, the feathers tickling my skin. Her back leg twitched slightly as she let out a happy sigh. I heard whispers under her breath.
I wish we could stay like this forever.
I silently agreed with her. It was surprisingly peaceful, sitting there with Twilight wrapped in my arms, her warm body pressed against mine. I almost forgot about the growing pain in my shoulder as we lay back there. It was interrupted, however, by a bright flash of light that filled the room. Blinking back the spots that were now dancing in front of my eye, I watched as a single scroll fell into the bed in front of us. Reluctantly, I released Twilight and she leaned up forward, picking up the scroll. She brought it up to her face with a curious look in her face. I looked slowly turned to horror as she read out what was on the scroll.
It's from the princess,
She whispered, her voice terrified. Slowly she looked at me and handed me back the paper. Grasping in my hands, I unrolled it and read the message scratched across it.
Twilight, I am coming to meet him.
Ah, yelling Twilight. That is always one of the more harder voices to pull off. If at my peak, it's still really hard to do. I can't tell you how many retakes I had to do just to try to make it sound even somewhat decent, with my nose still a little bit congested and I'm still healing a bit, but I hope it sounded good still. Those who, I don't know a segue from this. Those who don't care how it sounds, of course they care how it sounds. That's my whole shtick. I'm a voice actor, damn it. But thank you to my wonderful Patreons, my tier 1s. Angel Bloof, Dreamless Portal, Hyperlink, 9Game, Lost Nebula, Michael McDonald, Redeemer of Dark, CHHH4, Jason, Lord High, Macaria, Pony Pony Entertainment, and Julius Costa Peters. My tier 2s, Captain Blueshadow, Tuna Trooper, Enter Ingram, Chaotic Mist, Cloudzaza, Danish Dash, Jay the Firewolf, DJMX 2000, Elemental Wolf, Souls Eclipse, Weewoo, David M. Coleman, Dioxetine, Mackenzie McColas, G-Man 121 Garza, H1 Wolf King, Ken Panzer, Mr. Crazy Deegan, Nobody, Nocturne, Rocky 2522, Six, Potato 20, Saint Gonk, Riani Dragonwolf, Sword Brother Mordred, Volcod, and Max Garbanzo. The big thing to my previous Titan tiers, Dark Guardian, Danish Dash, Maverick, and User 1842. And a big thank you to my previous ones, Miss Eclipse and Silent Titan. I appreciate your support so much, and it means a ton to me. That said, however, this has been Firehearth. Have a wonderful day.